Do you ever feel that sense of urgency and just motivation that makes you want to get things done? Well, that hit me over the head not too long ago, like the Trickster's weapon with the back of Yen Jinli's head. I know you probably clicked on this video to learn what's good, sweaty, or viable on the Trickster, but I like to go over the killer's background and lore ahead of time just for a better understanding of how they play and the mindset that as the character you would have. Don't like it? Oh well. Anyways, Ji-woon was that quiet and introverted kid that we all knew in school, but had a life-changing experience when his father took him to a concert and became obsessed with the attention and mesmeric power that the lead performer had over the crowd. Since then, he, with his father's backing, would spend hours and hours performing and practicing a variety of skills and talents, including what he's best known for in-game, and that's knife throwing. It wouldn't be too long till his chapter counterpart Yunjin Lee would recruit him for her training program for a band with the then Mighty One entertainment group. With that being said, Ji-woon is a bit of a narcissist and only cares for himself, so when his bandmates were screaming his name when they were trapped in a burning studio, he only thought of himself and the euphoria he gained from his mates screaming his name for help. Ji-woon, Ji-woon, over and over again, begging for their lives. Their blood-curdling screams on the verge of death awakened something in the Ji-woon, and from then on, he needed more screams, as they would soon become an integral part of his music as he wove sounds together that he would dance to and perform to. As a rebranded solo artist now that his teammates were dead, the Trickster would go on to be quite successful. As a celebrity in the public eye, Ji-woon was unsuspected of wrongdoing. He would use his influence as a celebrity, the money that came along with it, and the power Yunjin Lee wielded as his manager, to ultimately set up and plan out his next music performances, for lack of a better word, excursions. One-on-one time where he would torture his victims, essentially dissecting them, produce screams and screeches that energized him and ultimately his music. Ji-woon in some regards is similar to another killer that we have in-game, and that's Ghostface. He's methodical and is meticulous with the planning and execution that comes with picking out a victim and ultimately kidnapping them. However, being a narcissist comes cockiness, and as such he would even leave calling cards with each victim with something of his own possession, which is noted in several of his add-ons. It's alluded to in Tome 9 Crescendo that Yunjin is aware of Ji-woon's sinister nature, but ultimately decides to turn a blind eye to it, to hold on to her quality of life and her career moving forward, as her success is ultimately dependent on Ji-woon's success. When it comes time to present his magnum opus performance to the executives of Mighty One to save not only his contract, but Yunjin Lee's career, does Yunjin fully grasp the consequences of her actions? The meeting had ultimately become a trap, as gas was leaked in ahead of time before Ji-woon was set to arrive. After drugging the executives and dissecting them, he performed his heart out with Yunjin Lee as the only observer, semi-consciously just watching him from a distance, as he finally then turned his attention and knife towards her. With each of them at their peak emotional energy, does the entity finally reach out to take them from the world. I'm going to go over a quick lore-based build for the Trickster, as you don't really need to know the power in order to build a lore-based build, just with perks. The first perk in the build is Starstruck, as the concert he had went to with his father had ignited his own desire for stardom, and the praise from others that Ji-woon would soon seek later in life as a performer. Infectious Fright is the next perk in the build, as the screams and pain inflicted onto others would fuel Ji-woon's music and performances that ultimately led him to become a killer. This goes back to Starstruck, as the cheering fans and screams that they gave to him each and every performance would ultimately dominate and basically change the direction of his music career entirely. And as for the last two perks, remember how I said he was similar in a way to Ghostface? Well, the last two perks are Ghostface teachable perks, including I'm All Ears and Furtive Chase. I'm All Ears is here for the reason that his way of picking out his victims is very methodical, because he tracks down their movements and mannerisms before he kidnaps them, so he knows where they'll go, which is parallel to the effects of I'm All Ears in-game. And Furtive Chase is here for the reason that he's able to get away with what would normally be suspicious activity, and he's also able to keep up the facade of innocence while also masking his true intentions. The flavor text of Furtive Chase reads as the following: "You lurk in the shadows, eliminating your victims one by one." And just like Ghostface, that's exactly what Ji-woon does, except instead of being a newspaper reporter, he's a pop star instead. Now as for his power, Ji-woon, aka the Trickster, through his years of performance with throwing knives, has acquired the power known as Showstopper. Showstopper allows the Trickster to carry 44 knives on him by default at any given time that he can throw at the survivors to deal out damage. Each time you hit a survivor with the knife, their laceration meter fills up around their survivor icon. The more you fill the meter, the better. When the laceration meter is filled up entirely, the meter will turn red and give you a sharp sound noise effect, indicating that the survivor is just one more knife away from being damaged one health state. If you fail to continuously hit the survivors with knives though, the laceration meter will decay over time and go down, so knowing how to throw your knives can better prevent this. There's two ways really of going about throwing your knives. The first is by throwing the knives one at a time, in which you tap the throw button, rather than holding it to spam the knives. This is best used when line of sight is limited and you're running low on knives in general. Because spamming, on the other hand, while it can be fun and effective in open areas like dead zones and narrow hallways, it slows you down considerably. And it also gives you a slight amount of recoil that can throw off your aim, as he uses both arms to throw his blades, compared to all the other killers who use just one hand with their weapon. Also, because you only have 44 knives, it can go real fast if you get too knife throw happy, as a word of caution. And if you run out of knives mid-chase, stopping to reload can allow the survivor to make a lot of distance against you, which is only just one downside to the Trickster. And speaking of downsides, let's talk about his special ability, Main Event, in its current state. This special and all-powerful attack requires you to land numerous knife hits on the survivors to ultimately build up the power bar completely before you can trigger it. When you reach the threshold to use Main Event, you have a 30-second window to use the ability, otherwise you lose it entirely, and your power bar empties once more. While in Main Event, however, your movement speed is decreased once more, and you unleash a flurry of knives at superhuman speed that lasts for roughly 10 seconds. This can be extended, however, because the Trickster has so many special add-ons that are just devoted to extending the duration of Main Event for some reason. The only real way you can get value out of Main Event is having the right setup for it, such as finding survivors out in the open, or camping a hooked survivor and you're on the verge of triggering it already. Anyways, after you use the Main Event, you suffer a brief period of fatigue and are locked out of your inventory of knives for a few seconds. Outside of those rare times you get to use Main Event, the only redeeming quality about using his power is that it doesn't deplete your own inventory of knives ahead of time. The other important downside to the Trickster is that he moves at 4.4 meters per second or 110% movement speed, meaning looping and traversing the map are your weak points, and as such your power is basically used to make up for it. And for this, accuracy and precision are the key to being successful as the Trickster. Anyways, I'm just going to state the obvious real quick so we can move on from it, but anything that decreases your reload time is great and consistent to use on the Trickster, such as Iron Maiden and his Melodious Murder add-on, as well as carrying extra knives in general. For add-ons, the Trickster doesn't really have that many that change how you play him, except perhaps his Iridescent Photo Card add-on. This causes the survivors to become exposed when their laceration meter is filled up to the point when they're within 2 blades of becoming injured. This add-on makes you much more dangerous as the Trickster, because it can allow you to quickly snowball since you only need to land 4 blade hits, and because you don't injure them, they can't get a speed boost and make distance from you. For this reason, it's really easy to slug with this add-on, especially if the survivors are grouped together. Because you'll knock the survivors down with a basic attack, Knockout pairs very well with this playstyle. Knockout has the effect that whenever you down a survivor with your basic attack, it hides their aura from all other survivors if they're more than 16 meters away, while also providing some minor debuffs to them as well. With Knockout, I like to pair it with its classic counterpart Deerstalker to keep track of the slug survivors. Other perks that work well with this are Jolt, for instance. Jolt also has the ability that whenever someone's put into the dying state with a basic attack, all generators within 32 meters of the dying state survivor explode by 8%. And if the damage generator event score shows up as a result of Jolt triggering, you can have a better understanding of which generators the survivors are working on. And if you get multiple generator event scores, you can leave the slug survivor and head to the nearby generators to continue the cycle of both exposing and downing other survivors. With these 3 perks and Monitor and Abuse, I've had a lot of success with this particular build for several games in a row I used it. One perk that I was experimenting with that I was hoping would be good on the Trickster for the purposes of this build was Play With Your Food. This perk gives you a token when you let the obsession escape a chase, with each token giving you an additional 5% increase to your movement speed. Needless to say, you could imagine how disappointed I was to learn that each individual knife that you throw causes you to lose a token of Play With Your Food, as each knife is considered an offensive action, despite not damaging a survivor until you hit them with a 6th knife. Other items that pair very well with this build are the ones that increase the number of knives you can hold at any given time, as that's never not useful. But to my surprise, the ones that increase the delay before the laceration meter starts decaying were actually quite useful for keeping them exposed, even during chases and loops, for instance. I'd always discounted these particular add-ons, and honestly, they're not half bad after using them quite a few times. The next 2 add-ons I want to discuss go hand in hand together, as they're important to use together for their synergy, and that is the Edge of Revival album and the Cut Through You single. The Edge of Revival album makes the blade shatter when hitting the environment, but only gives the survivor half the normal amount of laceration as the trade-off to using it. With the Cut Through You single being able to pierce the survivors, it can slightly change how you play the Trickster. Instead of aiming squarely dead on at the survivors, you have a little more leeway with where you can aim your knives at. If you choose to aim your knives at the survivors' feet, the blades will pierce through the survivors and shatter in the environment, thus dealing damage to the survivors even more. In a comical way, it's like when a bad guy aims a gun at your feet and tells you to dance for them, but with knives instead. especially on a map like the Raccoon City Police Department or Midwich Elementary School, where hallways restrict the survivor's ability to dodge and weave your knives essentially. For the reason of being able to damage the survivors easily, I think Terminus is a great perk to use with this combination. Terminus has the effect that all survivors who are injured when the exit gates are powered and become injured afterwards become broken until the exit gates have been open for at least 30 seconds. Being able to force the survivors to open the exit gates makes Blood Warden a nice combination perk to use with it. Blood Warden reveals the aura of survivors who are inside the exit gates, and once per trial, hooking a survivor will block both exit gates for 60 seconds, thus preventing them from escaping ultimately. With Terminus forcing the survivors to open the exit gates if they want to heal, and ultimately run back into the trial to save a teammate, it makes it less obvious you have Blood Warden until it's too late for the survivors. Other in-game perks are useful on the Trickster as well, like they are on most other killers. So No Way Out, Noed, Remember Me, if you really want to go all out for an endgame Trickster build. However, I like using Iron Maiden for the increased locker reload speed and monitoring abuse still. The next add-on I want to discuss is this Diamond Cufflinks. This add-on reveals the aura of a survivor when they're one blade hit away from losing a health state for 6 seconds. I've seen some content creators go for crazy shots with their aura reading ability with this add-on, however I largely find the aura reading inconsequential. A nice aspect of using it, however, is being able to see how the survivors tightly hug the environment in order to avoid the knife hits, but I digress. Like other aura reading abilities, I used Lethal Pursuer with it to extend the aura reading duration for an additional 2 seconds. It's a good feels-good perk for the purposes of the add-on, and because you can also see the survivors at the start of the trial for 9 seconds so you don't waste time looking for them. Another perk I like using with Lethal Pursuer is Floods of Rage. Each time a survivor is rescued from one of the 4 Scourge hooks around the map, the aura of all other survivors are revealed to you for 7 seconds. And if you're going to run a Scourge hook perk, you might as well use another one or two to increase their effectiveness. Scourge hook Pain Resonance is never not useful, especially on a slower movement speed killer like the Trickster for instance. Anyways, Pain Resonance has the effect that when you hook a survivor on one of the 4 Scourge hooks, it causes the generator with the most amount of progress on it to explode and regress by 15%. This perk is one of the ones that reward you for getting multiple hooks above all else, and can effectively turn the tide of a game if you are able to get hooks in quick succession. I also like to think Gift of Pain works well on the Trickster, again because of his slower movement speed and generally lack of map pressure in the 4v1 scenario. Gift of Pain applies the Mangled and Hemorrhage status effects to the survivors who are unhooked from the Scourge hook, and if the survivor is healed back to healthy, they have a massive 16% debuff to healing and repairing generators. I feel with this combination of Scourge hooks, it really encourages you to go for different survivors and to ultimately not tunnel and camp, which I think is healthy for gameplay purposes. Anyways, another regression perk that I think works well on the Trickster is Call of Brine for its simple effect. After kicking a generator for the next 60 seconds, the generator regresses at twice the normal rate, and if a survivor returns to it and hits a good skill check on it, it'll give you a loud noise notification to alert you that someone's working on it. Speaking of kicking, I found the combination of Fire Up and Brutal Strength to be pretty fun to use on the Trickster, especially with Call of Brine. Brutal Strength just gives you the flat 20% increase to kicking actions, whereas Fire Up affects almost every one of your action speeds, and only gets stronger towards the end of the game. Also, because every map doesn't have low wall loops like the Autohaven realm, it makes dealing with high wall pallet loops more bearable, because the Trickster's slower movement speed makes playing around them very difficult otherwise. The one criticism I have with Fire Up is I wish it affected your locker searching speed, aka reload speed for certain killers, that's all. Anyways, I'm going to close out the video by discussing the Trickster's last noticeable add-on, and that is his Trick Blades. Trick Blades have the effect that it causes your knives to bounce off the environment twice, and I'm of the opinion that this should have been made base kit because right now he plays almost exactly like the Huntress and Deadslinger, but with minor differences. Having the knives bounce off the environment would, I think, increase his skill ceiling, as you would need to learn basically how your knives would bounce off certain obstacles in the environment. I also feel like this would greatly differ how you play him from other ranged killers' perspective, and make decision making more important when playing him. Anyways, main event. I think it would be fitting that while in main event you moved at normal movement speed, but you could dash forward at increased speed like a Blight Rush / Nurse Blink. But because it's the Trickster, it would be more of a dance performative thing. And after performing a dash with the click of a button, you could throw multiple knives in one throw, similar to how a ninja would throw his shurikens. This would also tie in the ability to the character's background as a well-known performer, and make main event more worthwhile to use for either map mobility or in chase to get around obstacles quickly. And lastly, this would open up a range of his ability that new add-ons would be created for, because right now there's simply just too many that are weak or small quality of life buffs, and ultimately revolve around main event in my opinion. After playing and experimenting with the Trickster for the purposes of this video, I come to realize he's a killer to play for fun and not competitively, because even if I lost a game and everyone escaped, I still had a lot of fun playing as him. The sound effects, his catchphrases, the aesthetic combined with his background and lore, made me appreciate both his and Yunjin Lee's characters more than I probably would otherwise. And I encourage those of you who are watching to go out and learn more about your favorite character to enjoy the gaming experience more. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. I'm me, Preston3, and I will see you next time. Goodbye for now.